Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's discussion on what the State Department and U.S. embassies can and cannot do in a crisis. My name is Anthony Colaha, and I'm the Director of the Office of Global Educational Programs within the State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. In this role, I oversee efforts to attract qualified international students to the United States through our Education USA Global Advising Network, and to increase and diversify Americans taking part in study abroad through our USA Study Abroad programs and initiatives. These programs include the Benjamin A. Gilman International Scholarship Program, the Critical Language Scholarship Program, and the Capacity Building Program for U.S. Study Abroad, which is hosting this Ideas webinar today as part of an ongoing series focused on helping U.S. higher education institutions prepare for a safe and ethical return to study abroad in the future. Today's webinar is the second one we have hosted with our colleagues in the State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs, or CA. CA is responsible for the welfare and protection of U.S. citizens abroad. Their highest priority is to protect the lives and interests of U.S. citizens overseas, which they do through routine and emergency services to Americans at our embassies and consulates around the world. Consular Affairs also provides safety and security information for every country in the world through their travel advisories. For those of you who missed our first CA webinar this past January on the State Department's travel advisories, I encourage you to visit our Ideas website at studyabroadcapacitybuilding.org to view the recording. I am pleased to host today's discussion with Consular Affairs to provide information on how the State Department and its U.S. embassies can and cannot support U.S. citizens, including study abroad students, during a crisis. Study abroad has always carried a number of risk factors, and we must continue to be prepared to respond to any number of these, COVID-19 being just one. Our goal for today is to connect the U.S. higher education community directly with Consular Affairs on how they can support you and the American students you send overseas to study, intern, and volunteer abroad. We are committed to facilitating these types of conversations because American study abroad students directly support the State Department's diplomatic work. As Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, people-to-people exchanges bring our world closer together and convey the best of America to the world, especially to its young people. So we look forward to the day when in-person exchanges can resume again in earnest. But until then, my office will continue working hard to provide opportunities for our outstanding and diverse American undergraduate and graduate students to engage with the world. We have adapted our Gilman and CLS to account for the current largely virtual space, and we've launched webinars such as today's to help us all prepare for a strong return to American student mobility, while keeping safety and ethical considerations at the forefront. For Ideas, our next virtual engagement will be a longer one, a 2-day workshop focusing on program assessment and evaluation, put together in partnership with Mount Holyoke College. So join us to learn best practices in assessing the impact of study abroad and how to use this data to advocate for your programs. I also invite you to join USA Study Abroad on April 15th. For the next event in our ongoing Internationalization of Higher Education in the COVID-19 Era webinar series. This engagement will focus on international strategic partnerships and how higher education institutions can build and maintain positive relationships virtually. For more information on these and other initiatives, please visit USA Study Abroad's website at studyabroad.state.gov. And to start today's conversation, I am pleased to introduce Shane Myers, Managing Director of Overseas Citizen Services within the State Department's Bureau of Consular Affairs. Shane is a career member of the U.S. Senior Foreign Service and most recently served as the Deputy Chief of Mission and Charge d'Affaires at U.S. Embassy, Santo Domingo. So thank you for joining us, Shane. I appreciate your team's dedication to protecting American citizens overseas and for partnering with us to host this important discussion. So the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. I'm really glad to be here today. I've had a lot of opportunities over the years to engage with exchange students overseas. I haven't had as much opportunity to engage with the folks back at home who make all these programs possible. So thank you again for those of you who were able to join the previous webinar on travel advisories. I'll touch on those a little bit today, but as Anthony said, that information is still available. Today, we're going to go a little bit beyond the travel advisory world and talk a little bit more about what our missions overseas can and can't do to support U.S. citizens during a crisis. I'm sure most of you already know, and in fact, Anthony just said, that the Bureau of Consular Affairs is charged with the protection of U.S. citizens overseas. This is the Department of State's highest priority, and you'll hear Secretary Blinken and others say that at every opportunity. And while we help where we can, we are limited in what we can do. So in the actual moment of a crisis, for example, we can provide crisis information on our websites. We provide security alerts, which we send out through the Smart Traveler Enrollment program. We utilize social media to expand that reach to anyone who might be looking for information. And oftentimes that information includes how to depart a crisis area. We can also offer financial assistance in the form of loans to help people who need to depart wherever the crisis might be. And we can help with things like emergency passports and provide medical providers and a list of medical providers and things along those lines. But what I really want to stress today is prior to the crisis and crisis proper planning and prevention. So before I jump into that, I just want to highlight a couple of the key things that we cannot do. And these are really important to take into consideration while you're planning what might happen if there is a crisis. We cannot guarantee that we will be able to evacuate you or your students. In some instances, crises just happen too fast or they're too large to allow for a sponsored evacuation. We cannot transport people within a foreign country to reach an international egress point. If we do have an evacuation to a safe haven, which is generally a city outside of the United States at a safe distance from wherever the crisis is happening, we cannot guarantee lodging or other arrangements at those safe haven locations. And then finally, and this is a big one, we cannot pay legal bills, medical bills, or travel expenses. When we do foster evacuations, if they are State Department run, they are done on a promissory note basis. So there are fees involved and charges for an evacuation in the event of a crisis. So how we respond to a crisis really depends on the circumstances of the event itself. So the first thing we're going to ask is that anyone who plans to go overseas, but particularly our study abroad students who are going to be a year or potentially more in whatever destination they're heading to, is really plan ahead. Read all of the reference materials that we provide on travel.state.gov. Get to know the realities on the ground of the country in which you will be living or in which you're discussing with your student population. And this will help really prepare for sort of the small personal crisis, or in the event of a larger crisis, to prepare the travelers for what they can expect on the ground and better enable them to not rely solely on the U.S. government. So the first thing that we're going to really push out to people, provided that there's time, is a recommendation that they depart. Now, obviously, that can only happen when we can see the crisis coming. So an annual event such as a hurricane or hurricane season, we see this every year, where we will push out advisories that say strong storms headed your way. We really advise that you travel out of the area now if possible. And in the Dominican Republic, that was absolutely an annual event, sometimes a couple times a year. That's not always possible. Sometimes things like political demonstrations, as we recently saw in Burma, might grow very rapidly and make it difficult to leave a country. So we ask that everyone who's overseas seriously consider whether remaining in place is a good idea while there's time to do so. Now, we did actually just recently assist a number of folks leaving Burma, but it took some doing, and it was not immediate. It was after the situation there had reached a near boiling point. ideally people would have had the opportunity to depart. And in fact, we did recommend that people depart prior to that. We also ask that when you are planning for contingencies overseas, that you do not rely solely on the U.S. government or even the host country government. There needs to be a certain level of self-reliance. Now, personally, I'm a huge fan of the ready.gov website. I use it for my planning when I'm overseas. I use it for my planning at home, and I've got my mom and my family every year kind of checking their readiness for things like big snowstorms or bad weather, inclement weather that could really impact where they live throughout the country. Again, that's ready.gov. It has a lot of really useful, really easily digestible information on personal preparedness. So some of the things that we ask people take into consideration while they are making these plans, or in the event that a fast-moving crisis has developed, is first and foremost, are commercial travel options still available? Departing the crisis zone via commercial flight as early as possible is always the best alternative. And towards the end, I'm going to talk a little bit about our experiences with the COVID pandemic evacuations around the world. But I cannot stress enough how early access to commercial air travel can make all the difference in someone getting out of a crisis zone or needing to hunker down. Then you also need to consider the proximity to consular staff or to an embassy or consulate in the area to which you or your students will be traveling. So while we have presence almost everywhere on the planet, it's not always readily accessible from a secondary city in a large country. So it's really important to know where we are in relation to where you are. And then, is it safe to move during the crisis? So while I stressed the need to consider departing early, mostly that is to ensure safety and, of course, access to flights. But it's every traveler's responsibility to assess the situation that they find themselves in. There may be commercial flights, but they may be on the other side of whatever the event is that's occurring or occurred. And so it may actually make more sense to hunker down. And these are all things that each person has to take into account for themselves. Now, those are sort of addressing the large scale events, and we see things like hurricane season, there are unpredictable earthquakes, there's political unrest, even the pandemic, really big, large scale events that affect host countries and entire populations. Not all the crises that U.S. citizens face overseas are of that magnitude, and in fact, most aren't. Most of the crisis that people find themselves in overseas is really much more of a personal nature. It's not an earthquake or a pandemic. So it could be that they've become the victim of a crime overseas. It could be that they've just simply lost their passport, or it could be there's an emergency at home that really requires them to get back as fast as possible. And the department, through our consulates and embassies, are of course available to assist in any way that we can. But again, there are limits on what we can and can't do in this realm of the personal emergency. So for victims of crime, we will do things like provide a passport if that's necessary, but also a list of local attorneys and or medical providers who speak English and have indicated a desire to work with U.S. citizens in that country. We will help link people to local resources overseas, and that could be counselors, it could be shelters, it could be whatever resources are available on the ground for the situation that's out at hand. And we'll help take care of other emergency needs like contacting families or making sure that you can get in touch with credit card companies and things along those lines. What we cannot do is investigate the crime. We cannot provide legal representation or advice. We can't serve as an interpreter with the police or other local authorities. And we can't pay bills on behalf of people. So those are pretty high level what we can and can't do. And you're going to hear more about this in the presentations that come. But I want to provide just a few anecdotes of sort of things that we've seen in the last few years around the world that might help make this a little more clear. So obviously everyone remembers where we were around this time last year with the pandemic spreading really quickly across the globe. And there are at any given time millions of US citizens around the world. During the height of what we call repatriation or the evacuation phase of the pandemic, we brought over 100,000 US citizens and permanent residents back to the United States. This was almost entirely after countries closed their borders to international travel. And that closure, that cessation of regular air travel happened astonishingly fast. Really, we weren't ready for the speed with which countries said they were not going to let anyone in or out. So facing this challenge, our embassies and consulates worked really long and hard to overcome the logistical and communications barriers involved in bringing so many people home. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of these folks were far away from either us or an international airport. If you just think of all the people on any given day prior to last year hiking the Inca Trail to go to Machu Picchu, very remote, almost impossible to reach them, and very difficult for them to get back to where an evacuation flight could occur. So we ended up evacuating a lot of US citizens who probably could have departed through commercial means, but didn't heed our warnings, granted the time frame was short, but didn't take the advice to leave while they could seriously. And some of these folks were stuck for a fairly long time while we worked to get flights in to get them out. Now, ultimately, we brought home, I'm pretty sure I can say, everyone who wanted to come home on those flights, but it took a long time. It was difficult and it was expensive. And we've learned a lot from that experience, and we're pushing that information out through the various travel advisory and alert products that we publish. And we're working with our posts to try to figure out how to prevent that from happening again in each given country. Also a large task. Some of you may have also heard in 2018, 2019 about a lot of unrest taking place in Haiti. So at that time, in that circumstance, we did not arrange for evacuation because flights were still available throughout the duration of the crisis. However, the situation between the airport and where most folks live was bad, and people couldn't readily access the airport. They couldn't get on the flights to depart. So in those cases, we pushed out shelter-in-place information. We provided alerts to what was happening in and around Port-au-Prince and other parts of the country. And we did provide some information about private options, such as helicopter services that could take people to the airport. Now, clearly that's not a solution for everyone, but throughout that process, we really tried to push out as much information as we could so that everyone could make informed decisions. And in my own experience throughout the years, I've mostly served in Latin America. I've met a large number of folks who were doing study abroad years. Thankfully, most of them were not in emergent situations, but I have also met a large number of people who just simply didn't have a plan on what they were going to do if the worst happened. And while we are always there to help, it does make things easier for everyone if this is something that people go into with a little forethought. And so I think with that, I'll pass it back to Anthony. And I thank you for attending. I thank you for all of the work that you do, and for please really pushing this message out to your students. And I think I misspoke. It looks like Dan's going to take it from here. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to your questions.
Thanks so much, Shane. And you're right, we're just going to move right into the panel discussion. Really appreciate your insight, Shane, and I think reinforcing and bringing home much of what Das King talked about in her remarks in the first webinar series. So really warm welcome to everyone. Thank you, Anthony, again, and your colleagues at ECA and our partner at World Learning for hosting this event. I think we're really happy to be here. As you know, Consular Affairs has been busy. We continue to be busy, but this outreach is, I think, critical to our mission and talking with people who are really on the front lines as well in terms of preparing young people to go overseas and to study abroad. This is really important for us. We had a wonderful round of discussions and wonderful engagement in the last webinar, and we are going to build on that today. Today's presentation will build on the idea of understanding travel advisors. We're going to go a lot further and talk a bit more about the details of the help and the support that we can and can't provide overseas. And to do that, we're going to follow a very similar format. We have 3 panel members who are experts in their fields and who are dedicated day in and day out to the work that we do in consular affairs and the work that we do to support American citizens. Some of the information will be a repeat, but it's really important to understand that we hope that it sinks in. That's the idea, is that it's repeated for a reason. We'll move quickly through that, but just know that we are going to talk a little bit about where you can get information about travel advisories, about STEP, and the like. We want to make sure that we explain and recognize and thank everybody that's in the audience that are participating today, because we look at you and we see you as partners in preparing young people to go abroad and preparing students and faculty members and others from your universities to stay safe when they're overseas. So it's really a partnership for us that is really valuable. And we thank you for the work that you do. With that, I will move to introduce our panel and or at least ask them to kind of give quick, super quick introductions of themselves. You'll see in the chat our full bios will be kind of dropped in the chat there, so we don't have to spend a long period of time on that. So joining us today from Washington, D.C., or in the Washington, D.C. area, are Jeremy Cassano and Jolie Hildebrand. And then from U.S. Embassy London, we have Cassie Hager. So thank you to the 3 of you. Take it away. We'll do about 15 or 20 minutes of this presentation. And then following that, just as we did last time, we'll have a robust Q&A. So I think we're going to start with Jolie, if I'm correct. But if I'm not, you guys will correct me. And thanks, everyone. Here we go.
Jolie, you're muted.
Oh gosh, that was embarrassing. Sorry about that. I'm Jolie Hildebrand. I am a Foreign Service officer. So like Cassie, I spend most of my career working overseas. But I'm currently working here domestically in Washington, D.C. in the Office of Overseas Citizen Services. I've been here for about 2 years now, almost 2 years. And let Cassie and Jeremy introduce themselves before we jump in.
Hi, I'm Cassie Hager. I am the Special Citizen Services Chief at U.S. Embassy London. I am also a Foreign Service officer like Jolie and Jeremy. I have served in Guangzhou, China, Bogota, Colombia, Baghdad, Iraq, and various offices in Washington. I'm happy to be here today.
Hi, everyone. Jeremy Cassano here. I'm a civil servant within the Office of American Citizen Services. That means I work exclusively out of Washington, D.C. So I get to sit back and be jealous of Cassie and Jolie for all their foreign and extravagant jaunts all over the world. But every 2 years when they're packing their stuff up, I get to kick back and put my feet up. So, give and take, right? But very happy to be here with you all. Thank you so much.
Okay, and with that, I think we will go ahead and jump in. So as we mentioned, when we did our quick intros, we have two main parts of consular officers, and that is foreign service officers and civil service officers. So we also have a number of contractors who we partner with closely here in Washington as well. And we have many local staff members in our overseas posts, and everyone is essential to the services that we provide to U.S. citizens. So Shane mentioned that we have a presence in many parts of the world, and that is definitely true. I think it's somewhere around 260 plus consulates and embassies abroad. So certainly a strong presence, even though we can't be everywhere all the time to assist our citizens. We certainly do our best. And but let's roll into the next one. I think I hit the highlights on that. Okay, so this, just to quickly recap the slides, I know many of you were on the session in January with our colleagues Beth and Ryan and Chris, and they discussed in detail the travel advisory, but I just wanted to, this is such a great image, such a great visual of our travel advisory, so I wanted to just bring this up again for you, because an informed traveler is a prepared traveler, and we want to make sure that all of your students and your students' parents and your program directors who are overseas as well are prepared and have all the information they need to look out for their safety. So you'll remember maybe that there are 4 travel advisory levels from 1 to 4, 4 being a do not travel level. And when you see this on the travel advisory page, it's color coded, so you'll quickly be able to identify level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. You'll also see in the corner there on the right side a letter with a little circle around it. That if you see that, you're going to know right away by seeing these. You're going to see right away that it's noting a specific indicator that is for the basis for the primary safety concerns to U.S. citizens in that travel advisory for that country. So if you see the popular one right now is the health, so you'll see a little H in the corner for a lot of countries right now. And then you'll know that when you read through the travel advisory, you'll be looking for information regarding the health situation. So just pointing that out there. And then just a reminder, don't stop when you just see the bar. Make sure that you're reading through the entirety of the travel advisory. There's some good information there. All information that is updated regularly, that is very relevant to safety in the country and to local conditions. And if you keep going down, you'll see a lot of information about the country that's more detailed information about contact information for the embassy, which is very relevant, I'm sure, especially for the parents who you might get questions from. More detailed information about just the health infrastructure, for example, or what local laws are like. So just wanted to draw your attention back to this page, because this is really the primary place where you can look and where you can direct folks who are asking questions to you about different countries to refer to this safety information and to the information that we put out on countries worldwide. And then another quick recap from the session in January, in case you didn't have a chance to attend. Every embassy is maintaining a COVID-19 information page right now. So you'll find all sorts of really helpful information. It's updated very regularly. You'll see right on the top, as soon as you see it, you'll see when it was last updated, and you'll see that it's pretty recent, if not every day. Certainly on a weekly or at most a monthly basis, depending on the country's local conditions. So you'll see all sorts of information regarding the COVID-19 conditions in the country, things including entry and exit requirements, testing information, vaccine information, movement restrictions, quarantine information, transportation options. So all of those things that are related to kind of pandemic specific travel questions or health questions. A lot of that information, if not all of it, really is on those embassy pages and the COVID-19 information page for the embassy. So that. let me turn it over to Cassie then.
Hi, thanks, Jolie. Hi, everyone. So I'm from the embassy in London, for my case. I'm going to talk about planning ahead. Shane talked about this a little bit, but I'm going to go in a little bit more depth. The first thing is get informed. Every time I'm traveling or going to a new country, even if it's for the weekend or if it's to live, I check out travel.state.gov/destination. I know travel.state.gov is a huge website and it's sometimes overwhelming, but if you take it page by page, it's super useful. So when you go to the destination part, you put in the country you're going to. It's going to pop up a page and it's going to have the current and previous security alerts. That's anything that either the department or, in my case, if you're around the United Kingdom, it's what the Embassy London has sent out to any American citizen who's living in and or traveling through the United Kingdom. It's going to have what kind of expiration and validity do you need to have for your passport? Do you need a visa? How do you contact the embassy or the consulate that's near you? What's the safety and security information? What's the health information? And that's just a little bit of what we have on our country websites. And they'll also link you over to the embassy website for each country, which again has a ton of more information that's specific to the destination you're going to. Get required documents. So when I say get required documents, I mean your passport. If you don't have a passport, get a passport, apply for it now, even if you're just thinking of traveling in the future sometime. If you have a passport, check the validity. Is it available and valid for your entire trip and hopefully beyond your trip? Check that out. And also then go back to the travel.state.gov page to see, does the country I'm going to require my passport to be valid for 6 months, 9 months, a year beyond my travel dates? Does it require extra pages for visas? There's a ton of information again, and I'm going to direct you back to travel.state.gov over and over, so just get used to it. For visas, you want to know if you're going to need a visa for travel. Students almost always require visas. There are certain classes that don't, but you should find out, and your students should find out what's required and apply for them as soon as possible. There's always delays, whether it's bureaucratic or because of COVID, it could be a postal delay, and you want to get all of these things done so you're not waiting until the last minute. Once you have your travel dates and where you're going, then you want to enroll for the Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. And I'm going to call it STEP from now on. That's what I call it always. It's at step.state.gov. And this is how embassies communicate with American citizens in their country. We will send a message to anybody who's enrolled into the STEP program. Anytime there is a security alert, an emergency alert, a health alert. When COVID happened, we were sending tons of information out to anyone who was enrolled. Now, this stuff also gets propagated to our social media, but it is best and most timely to get it when you're enrolled through STEP. And the last thing I'm going to touch on is just preparing for the unexpected. Make sure you have travel insurance if you go abroad. If you have insurance, make sure that it's covered when you go overseas or leave the country. Find out what it covers. Is there a payment that you need to make, a copay? Don't rely on the U.S. government to evacuate you. Have a plan. And if you bring a pet overseas, have a plan for your pet, because the U.S. government, we prioritize people. And I know that pets seem like your children or are your children, but we have to prioritize people. Sorry. So you should also plan for unexpected expenses. And one tip I also would like to give is make a copy of the bio page, which is the photo page and signature page of your passport, a copy of your visa, and send that to someone that you trust so that if your passport is stolen, somebody has that information for you. We can go to the next slide. So what can the embassy do for you in a crisis and what can we not do? Shane's gone over some of this, but I'm just going to reinforce it. The most important thing that the embassy can do for you is provide information. Information on what's going on, what's happening, what the current status is, and what's going on. So while I can give you all the information, including how to get to the airport and if the airport's open, I can't come and get you. I can't get you a taxi and have them come pick you up. I can't come pick you up and get you to the airport. But what I can do is I can give you information on how you can make those arrangements yourself. I can provide emergency assistance. That means I can, if you get lose your passport or if your passport's stolen, then I can get you a new passport. It'll be an emergency passport, but it'll work. I can put you in contact with the local government if you have a visa to replace your visa. I can get you a list of lawyers who will help you and speak English. And I can also kind of give you a little background on the judicial system within the country that I'm in. And I can also give you a medical list where the nearest hospital is, where pharmacies are, how the clinics work in this country and how they're different than America. What I can't do is I can't be your bodyguard. I can't come and protect you. I can tell you where the police are and how to call them, but I can't be your personal protection. With financial assistance, I absolutely can help you out. If you need a loan to get back to the United States for whatever reason, if you find yourself destitute overseas, I can absolutely help you with that. And I can also help you with resources of shelters if you need them, or assistance when you get back home to resettle if you don't have a stable place. What I can't do, I can't pay your bills. I can't pay your legal bills, your medical bills, or your travel expenses, or really anything that you've incurred before coming to ask me for help. That's just a few things we can do, but we can talk about that if you call us and talk to us at any point. Next slide. So during a crisis, information and communication is key. Sometimes it's chaotic, but I'd like you to prioritize some things. And again, this is information that's helpful. Keep it in the back of your mind. And when a crisis happens, pull it to the front. The number one thing is follow local media. They have people on the spot. They know what's going on, and they usually give the best information. We follow them. We use them to help make our alerts, our security alerts. And if you're enrolled in STEP, as soon as we get that information, we're going to push it out through STEP and our text messaging. It's going to go through our social media. It's going to go through any way we can get a hold of you. What you should also do, and what the students should know, is they should follow what the local authorities are telling people to do. And if they are saying shelter in place, you should shelter in place. As long as you're not in any danger or injured, shelter in place, wait for some more information. We will again be sending things out. Once you're secure and set, contact your loved ones. Make sure they know you're okay. And this could be your family back home. This could be travel companions. Make sure they're safe. Notifying your tour guide, notifying your school or your study abroad counselor. Let them know you're okay. If you're in the United States and you're concerned about someone who's in a foreign country and there's a crisis around there, what I suggest that you do is, number one, go to travel.state.gov. All of the alerts that I'm sending out through STEP are going to be propagated to travel.state.gov. They'll be under the country where they're happening. You can also check the embassy website because we'll have that updated. But I recommend that you don't call the embassy because we're going to be busy dealing with people in country. What I recommend is that you call Washington. There's a number listed, 888-407-4747, and they're going to be the best able to help you. They're available 24/7. We update them. We bring them in if there's a crisis. They are fully on top of it. Next page. So when a crisis happens, we are going to start at the embassy level. And then we're going to start engaging more people depending on what's going on. Number one, we're going to set an alert and we're going to let the American citizens know what's going on. At the same time, we may be engaging the overseas citizen services officers, the duty officer if it's overnight. We could be engaging the State Department Operations Center who runs 24/7. And we could also then start engaging, depending on how large the crisis is, consulates in the area, the host government. We could even expand into countries that are near us, depending on how long or how big a crisis is. At times, depending on how large this crisis is, we could stand up a task force. And that's because the embassy is really busy working on things on the ground, helping people that are in country. And so what we do is we throw all of the other information to Washington. They stand up a 24/7 task force, and all of the questions go to them so they can answer it and let us do the work while we're overseas. There are going to be some really good links that are put down there on crisis, and I suggest you read those. They're, again, travel.state.gov/crisis. Amazing information. Next slide. So challenges. So as a consular officer, as a foreign service officer, one of the things that we do, and the most important thing we do, is help and protect Americans in need. But we do our best. I'll do the but now. But we're bound by law and we have limitations. One of the big limitations that I encounter that causes a lot of controversy when families are trying to find out about loved ones in distress is the Privacy Act. So the Privacy Act of 1974 was designed to protect personal information and records of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents from unauthorized disclosure. I'm bound by that. That means that no matter what's going on, I can't give anyone information about a person who is a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident without their written permission, their specific written permission. And this can't be by email. It can't be by phone. We work how we can, but we need a written document that says who I can speak with and who I can't speak with. So this can cause frustration. I want to make sure that expectations are met. And so when I get a call from a family member, the first thing I say is, I'm absolutely going to take the information that you're giving me. I'm going to take it and I'm going to do my best to find this American. I'm going to help them if they want help. I will do everything in my power to help them get back home if that's what they want. What I can't do is I can't relay what I find back to you as the family member or the concerned person. I will relay your message. I will give them a phone to call you. I will ask them to call you, but I can't release any information to anyone without their permission. There are certain exceptions for law enforcement and other serious, if they're unable to talk because they're in a coma. I'm certainly not going to keep information then. But those are very limited circumstances and extraordinary. So that's the biggest limitation. But there are other limitations, such as legal limitations. When Americans leave the United States and come into a foreign country, they are subject to their laws. I'm subject to their laws. I'm also subject to the U.S. laws, even though I'm in a foreign country, because I'm a representative of the U.S. government. And therefore, the Privacy Act waiver, or the Privacy Act, for which I need a waiver in order to do any work and provide any information for. But I also can't get Americans out of jail if they've broken the law. What I can do is provide a list of attorneys. If they sign a Privacy Act waiver, I can liaise with their family and make sure they have all the information they need. I can make sure they understand, if they're arrested, what the judicial process is in the country. And I'll also visit them and make sure that they are being treated well and fairly. Other limitations we have are, I'm not a medical provider, I'm not a psychiatrist or a lawyer, as I've stated before. But what I can do is provide resources and phone numbers and names and emails and websites that can help a person who is overseas and is in distress. And the other thing, the final thing we have are staffing limitations. I work in London, as you know. London has about, and through the UK, about 500,000 people normally travel through the UK every year. And we can have up to 250,000 in the United Kingdom every single day. Not now under COVID, but normal times. And when that's going on, I have a staff of 5. And that's 5 people to cover all of England, Scotland, and Wales. And so even if we're doing our best, I can't work 24/7. I'm going to do my best, and during crises, I may be working 24/7, at least for a short time. But we are limited by our staffing. But what we will do, I can guarantee you from Embassy London, is we're going to set your expectations and give you the information that we have, and provide it to anyone who asks for it. Next slide. So how to depart a crisis. Shane talked about this also. But the best way to depart a crisis is before the crisis happens or right when it happens. It's not always possible, but monitoring local government and local media, you can get a sense of what's going on in a country. And if the embassy says, hey, you should start looking at commercial options to get out of this country right now, you should start looking at commercial options to get out of the country. Number one, commercial airlines may be cheaper. They'll be easier, they'll be faster. We'll give you all the information you need on how to get to the airport, if the airport's opening, if they're running, what their hours are. And we'll put that on our website and we'll send it out in step messages. We may have information about charter companies that are flying out. I know during COVID, especially last year in March, we had many evacuations through either the U.S. government as a last resort in many locations, but also through charter companies. I know Peru had charter companies that were sending Americans back to the United States. In London and the UK in total, we never did an evacuation because Heathrow was always open. There may have not been many flights, but there were flights to America throughout the entire COVID crisis. Heathrow's never shut down. So as I said, evacuation's not guaranteed. So you should plan other options. And we are statutorily required to require loans and payments for any evacuations that we fund. And therefore, it's not a free flight, which some people thought it was. It did cost. So next slide. So I've been talking a lot about the big picture, big C, large crises, but really day to day, what my staff and I deal with are the individual crises, the personal crises. A family member in the U.S. has lost track of someone who's traveling overseas. Someone is robbed, either violently or just pickpocketed. There might be an assault of some sort. There are worse things. Somebody is arrested for breaking the law. There might even be a death. They happen all the time. It could be that someone has stepped off the curb wrong and broke their ankle. All of these in the moment emergencies we deal with. There's also, I'm around to handle questions about Social Security or voting. That was a big thing last year. And then if someone finds themselves in distress, destitute, in need to leave, but doesn't have the money and their family doesn't have the money, then I can help with a repatriation loan back to the United States. And we'll work with anybody on anything. You only have to ask. So that's all I have. I believe the next slide is going to be some resources. And they are super useful. Again, we're going to go through travel.state.gov. Again, it's got everything, some phone numbers. And then I believe we're also going to share our social media links. And I think we're going to questions and answers now. Thank you.
There is a ton of useful information there. Cassie, thank you so much. Jolie, Jeremy, thank you all. We're gonna get into the question and answers. I will say this: there's no way we're going to be able to respond to every question today. We in Consular Affairs are going to work with our colleagues in ECA to get answers to as many questions as we can in follow-ups, and that information we're hoping will get out to through ECA's network. So I just wanted to put that there first. So we had a bunch of really good questions submitted ahead of time, and I wanted to start with you know, a couple of those questions as we really open up to additional questions. And again, you know, I think we have prompted people to think and to wonder about other things. But I'm going to start with Jeremy, to you. It's a quick question, and panel members, do feel free to jump in if there is a need to sort of add something to it. If your colleague has got it covered, we can move to the next question. But Jeremy, just a little bit more on how information is communicated to American citizens in country. What are the avenues that that's disseminated?
Absolutely, Dan. Thank you. The biggest thing that I would say, the biggest takeaway on that question is please sign up for the STEP program. That stands for Smart Traveler Enrollment Program. The government office, it's got to have an acronym, right? A government program, I should say. It's not mandatory. You're not registering for anything. All you're doing is entering your phone number or email address or however you'd like to receive the information. And of course, if you got your email on your phone, you get our alerts right there on your phone. What the embassy does, or consulate, they create what we call security alerts or demonstration alerts or health alerts if it's information related to a pandemic, for instance. Short, sweet information that we send out. What do you need to know as a traveler living or studying or traveling through a foreign country? We send it up through the STEP program. And of course, if your parents are here in the United States and they want to sign up too, you can absolutely do that too. I'm signed up in STEP, even though I'm right here in Virginia. So you can absolutely do that. So STEP and those alerts is certainly the first thing. The second thing is that we're going to put information on our websites. So it's going to be up on travel.state.gov. It's going to be up on the embassy's website. Certainly, if we have a full-on crisis, there's often going to be a crisis bar at the top of travel.state.gov, a red bar or a yellow bar. And as you navigate through the different pages on travel.state.gov, that bar is going to follow you. We do that purposely so that we make it as easy as possible to find the crisis information. And then the other thing that comes to my mind is we have a wonderful group of individuals in almost every country who have volunteered to help us get the word out if need be. These people are our citizen liaison volunteers. And so in places where maybe it's harder to get internet coverage or whatever, we have our CLVs, our citizen liaison volunteers, who can help share the word if we're trying to get the word out that, hey, things are getting bad, they're going to get worse, everybody get out now. So STEP, our websites, and of course our citizen liaison volunteers. Between those three things, hopefully we're effectively getting the message out to people who need it.
And I would add social media. A lot of our embassies, almost every embassy's got social media, so I'll throw that in there. Great. I don't know if there's any follow on, but I'll move to the next question. Jolie, what's the best way to know about the operational status of an embassy? We are in this period of COVID now, but in other crises, the embassy itself might be impacted. So how can people find out, what's going on with the embassy if they do need an emergency service or to sort of figure out what their expectations are?
Thanks, Dan. Our contact information for the embassies, when in doubt, if you need it, you can always call the numbers or call the Washington, D.C. number if you're here in the U.S. And those numbers are on travel.state.gov. On the embassy's individual website, so for example, if you're interested in London, where Cassie is, you can go to their webpage, and somewhere under U.S. Citizen Services, they will have information about closures. It's most likely to be there. They may move it into a different point, into a different part, so that there's slight variations in the embassies and consulates web pages. But for the most part, it's standard right now that if there's a closure, if there's an unexpected change to services or something like that, most posts are highlighting that on their U.S. Citizen Services page. There you can also search in the little search bar at the top for holidays, and you can also double check to make sure that you're not choosing a holiday day. Maybe that's the issue if you're trying to make an appointment and it's not letting you. The other thing is you may, if we have a change that's to services that's not related to a security issue or a safety issue, but it's maybe there has to be maintenance work done, for example, inside the consular section, and for that reason, there's been a change to services, we would send out a message that's just sort of a routine message to U.S. citizens, letting them know that change is happening. And whatever the change is and details and how they can reschedule their appointment or schedule a new appointment, something like that. And then for the same, if it's a closure or change to services related to a safety issue, when an alert is disseminated through the STEP program, the embassy or consulate will put it in the alert text if there is a change to consular services. So there are a variety of places where you'll be able to see that information. And if you're in doubt, contact the consular section or contact us here in Overseas Citizen Services through the 4747 number, and we'll be happy to check and assist you.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. I would also put a plug in as sort of a little bit of an additional bit of information for study abroad participants who know that they're going to be in an area let's say for a semester overseas or even a year. Plugging in the address and phone numbers of the embassy, I think, is really helpful. With smartphones and smartphone technology, that address might even show someone who's looking for the embassy where it is, and that can save you a lot of trouble overseas as well. So Cassie, the next two questions come to you, and I think it's really important to get at these questions. We had a lot of pre-submitted questions. Some are somewhat sensitive, but we're going to ask them, and we need to have these conversations. The question is, what can the State Department and/or U.S. embassies and consulates do to assist students who have been sexually assaulted while abroad? Can embassies provide advice on safety and security when seeking medical treatment or reporting a crime?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, this is one of the hardest things that we deal with. And the embassy and consulates are there to help in these situations. And this is going to vary from country to country. So what I'm going to talk about initially is what's going on in the UK. Now, this is obviously a country that is very similar to the United States. We've got a police department who is very useful. They have trained officers who deal with assaults and sexual assaults all the time. So when we are notified of a sexual assault, what we will do, or any kind of assault really, I don't want to limit it, but what we will do is we will start with, is the person safe? Do you feel safe right now? And if they don't, then we're going to work with that person to get them to a safe area. We have shelters that we work with. We have hospitals. They can tell us where they are. We can figure out how to get them to a safe place. Once they're in a safe place, then we're going to ask them, have you reported this? Do you feel comfortable reporting this? And they can talk about it as much or as little as they want with us. We will, at that point, also discuss Privacy Act waivers, talking to their family. And even though we get a Privacy Act waiver, if they decide to sign one, we don't go around talking about cases and everything from start to finish. We're very judicious in the information that we share. We share it as needed, and we also share it with only people who need to know. So after we find out they're in a safe place, we check and see, have they been to the hospital? Have they reported it? If they reported it, Have they seen a doctor? Have they considered this sort of the treatments that may be needed? In the UK, this is all normal. It's safe to go to the police. It's safe to go to a hospital. They're there to help. There's no charge for emergency treatment in the UK. And we're very privileged that that the Met Police do have specialized and trained officers to help with victims of assault. This is not the case in every country. If you are in certain countries, it may not be safe to report it to the police because students could get arrested. It may not be safe to go to a hospital because where the hospital is not a safe area. The consulate or the embassy, when you call them, they will know this information and they will help guide the students to the safest place possible. We will also give resources that are local and how to help. We will, if they don't want to report it, we will help them no matter what. Again, with treatment options, where to go, support through local centers. If they don't feel safe where they live, we can assist, in the UK at least, we can assist with accommodation at a refuge that we work with. We can also help get people on planes and out of the country. Again, with these repatriation assistance, we can put them in touch with their local state, who also have a lot of resources for victims, even if it happens overseas. And then beyond the immediate care of the US citizen and the assault victim, we're going to be there through investigations, through hearings, through sentences. We're the people in country that may be here when the victim is long gone. In the past, when the victim didn't feel safe to come back to the country I was working in, we set up a video link where they were in their local police office and we had a video set up in the court so that they could participate and still feel safe. We will explain all of the judicial process. Again, we'll help be the liaison if needed. And we'll follow up with support and make sure they're getting the support and that the resources we've given them are being helpful. So I hope that helps explain just how we'll be able to help.
Yeah, and Cassie, I think that's a lot of additional information, and I think it demonstrates that things do vary by country, and that's important to understand as well, and that we would know that the embassy and our staff there will know about those variances and will know those things. So really appreciate that. Okay, similar, and it may be some of the similar information, but what assistance is available for U.S. citizens who are arrested abroad, and how do we sort of support them? I know you said we can't pay legal fees and we can't bail people out, but what if you could talk sort of briefly on this? Because the first one is maybe a victim of a crime, an assault, or something like that. This is an arrest, and there may be a lot of things that go into that, but generally. I'm not saying that every student does this. Most students are smart. Some
Absolutely.
make difficult choices or choices that are not advised, and there are consequences to that, as we know. I say this as a father of 2 university students. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure, absolutely. Yes, I deal, especially in the UK, I found, I deal with a lot of people who get arrested, whether it is for being too loud after a pub night, or all the way through to, I currently have people who are rapists, murderers, terrorists that I deal with. So students are usually not an issue. They're great. They're here to learn. They're here to have fun. We try to ensure that they understand that the laws in the country they're in are different, and they may have subtle changes. Even in the United Kingdom. What I can't do, I cannot bail people out of jail, as Dan said. I can't go and rescue you. I can't go and make the UK government let the student go because it's not fair. Or this isn't something that anybody would be punished by in the United States. If you're in the UK or in another foreign country, you're subject to their laws. And what I will do, police and countries are required to notify the embassy within 72 hours of being arresting a U.S. national or a U.S. citizen. And so as soon as I find out, we're going to immediately try to get in contact with the person who has been arrested. Sometimes we will hear about this from family members who are calling from overseas because the person who's been arrested calls them directly. Sometimes it might be a school who's calling us. In those cases, I will set up expectations about Privacy Act. I will explain to them what we do in typical cases, which is I will try to get in hold of them. One of my staff may call them. We'll get them on the phone first. We'll make sure that they're okay. We will make sure they don't have any medical needs or injuries or medicines that they need. And if they do, we will relay all that information to the police. Then what we'll do is we will find out what's going on. Are they going to be released, or are they going to be held in jail until their court date? It is going to depend on the country and the crime. If they're going to be held in jail until their trial, we will visit them. We will go and visit them until their trial, usually once a month until the trial happens. Hopefully it's not more than one time, but in times it is. And then once and when we're there, we will get a Privacy Act waiver signed. We will explain to them about the laws, the country, how to get an attorney. We can relay messages to the family if they are not allowed to make phone calls. We can be that conduit if there is trouble communicating directly with the prisoner. What we can also do is ensure that they are treated fairly, that they're not mistreated just because they're an American citizen. And then once the trial happens, we will monitor it and make sure that it is fair according to the legal system in the country we're in. And if it's not, then we will protest that because we absolutely do not want Americans treated worse just because they're an American in a foreign country, or a foreign country is trying to make a point. If the person is
Cassie,
sentenced.
can I interrupt here? And because we have about 10 minutes left, maybe
Yes.
a little bit less. No, it's fine. This is and I think you're talking about the Privacy Act. I'm going to pitch this one over to Jolie and to Jeremy on this, because this is very, very important to the folks that are listening, and it has to do with when a university is responsible for the safety and security of students, and then you have some students that might be under 18. So Jolie, maybe you could take that. And also, can a university override in a way and have some kind of privacy agreement with the student that overrides the Privacy Act waiver that we would have? So Jolie, let me pitch that to you, and then Jeremy, and Cassie will come back to you if there's anything else to answer on that.
Thanks, Dan. I think I'll ask Jeremy to jump in here at any point. I'll take a first try at it because it can be very complicated when the person is under 18, when the person is not a legal adult in terms of privacy. And because really what we're required to do by law is to balance in these situations the privacy rights of the individual and the parental rights of of the parents who may also be interested and have a right to information about their child. With regard to the education institution, I'm not aware of any, of the possibility of having an agreement between a student and an educational institution that would somehow override the Privacy Act that we are required to adhere to legally. So I'm not sure if Jeremy has had a different experience with that. But in terms of, it can be very complicated when the person is under 18. Particularly, we see this become complicated for those who are the victim of a crime overseas. They may not want their parents to know. They may not want the school to know. Hopefully, they're talking to someone, a friend or a teacher or a program director who's locally with them, so that they can get the help that they may need and the support that they may need. But we often have a team of lawyers here in Washington with whom we regularly consult on these very complicated privacy issues, and a lot of those are issues for the instances of minors, particularly when the minor's wishes are not coinciding with the wishes of the parents or the family. So I'll let Jeremy pick up there if I left anything out or mischaracterized anything.
No, Jolie, you nailed it. Our primary sort of focus with all things privacy is the Privacy Act of 1974. Our first move when we encounter someone overseas, certainly not our first move, but one of the many things that we'll talk to that person about will certainly be what their privacy wishes are. And this can be, a touchy thing, specifically with this population, right? Because, something happens to a student overseas, the study abroad program might want information. The parents back in the United States might want information, and the parents might be helping in all things, with the student's education and whatnot. But now all of a sudden this comes up, and now the State Department won't share any information with them. So it can be very jarring. It can be very upsetting for some people. And I totally understand. I mean, certainly we do our best to explain that, if we're not sharing anything, it's not because we're trying to be withholding or not trying to be difficult. Rather, we're just trying to make sure that we are protecting privacy rights, as is our role under the Privacy Act. People sometimes ask me, well, Jeremy, this person is in a coma overseas. You're telling me you're going to ask this person who's in a coma for a signature on a Privacy Act waiver? There are some exceptions. Typically, the exceptions require some sort of emergency situation, and typically require that the person that we are sharing information with be in a position to assist, right? So oftentimes, a congressional office, for instance, very important, has a lot of power, but certainly not be able to assist in that specific situation. However, if someone is in a coma, maybe mom and dad back in the United States know what medications that person takes. And so that could be a situation where someone is able to assist in a crisis. But bottom line, everything Jolie said is absolutely correct. We don't have any specific agreements that I'm aware of, at least, related to study abroad organizations. Our primary, our guiding light is going to be the Privacy Act. And if you have any questions, please always feel free to ask. And if our officers overseas don't know, they'll come into our team of lawyers, and that's what they get paid for, right?
If I could add one more thing, Dan, sorry to take more time away from more questions, but just a really important note that I find helps when I'm talking to a parent over the phone about their child is, or another loved one, on another family member, is I try to explain that there are exceptions to the Privacy Act, that in instances where we have information that someone's safety is an imminent risk, or that that they need urgent and immediate assistance, and we know that someone may be in a position to provide that, there are instances where we can take steps to ensure that person's safety. So don't think that, if we thought that something bad might happen to one of your students, and we had really real information that could happen, that we wouldn't try to reach out to a program, to one of you, or to a program director, or to a parent, and try to get immediate assistance to potentially save that person's life, or save them from harm. I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's great. I think we really are sort of toward the end. It's clear that we have not been able to get to everybody's questions. I understand that that's frustrating. I will pledge that we'll do our very best in working with ECA and with World Learning to sort of round back on a lot of the questions that were asked today. Clearly, the information that we are providing is valuable, it's useful, and we hope that everyone will act on it and learn more. We think that is the best way to prepare people overseas. If I could give each of you on the panel about 30 seconds just to wrap up. You can explain to us sort of why you got into this work, your best piece of advice that you would give someone in study abroad, even your connection and something that you did when you studied abroad that was meaningful to you. So I'll start with you, Jolie. I'll go to Cassie and then to Jeremy.
Well, I studied abroad 3 times, once in high school, once in undergrad, and once in grad school. And they were all amazing experiences. So I have nothing but respect and gratitude to those of you who work in international education. Uh, I don't know if I have advice or anything per se. Certainly I know that my parents were much more concerned at my safety of my for my safety when I was 16 and in my 20s than I was. So these resources are really great for parents, and a lot of the information on travel.state.gov. So I know it's not always the easiest website to navigate, but the pages that we put into the chat for you hopefully will help you with that and getting to the information that's most relevant to you. And I would add that for one of my study abroad program experiences, part of our orientation was actually all of us sat in the room together with the program folks, and they helped us fill out STEP. So we all entered into STEP while we were in a room together with our laptops. And that was great because then they could tell us the address, since we didn't know our host family's address, so they would give us the address. So I thought that was a great thing. It still sticks out in my mind all these years later. That and my study abroad programs used to give us a little card that had emergency contact information on it. This was before smartphones were very popular, but so maybe there's something more sophisticated for that now. But I thought that was a great thing. I actually still have the little laminated cards from those programs. So thank you so much for coming.
And Cassie, just over to you, 30 seconds.
Sure. I'm not going to talk about travel. I'm going to say that while I can't talk for every embassy in the world, I know that a lot would like to engage more with institution representatives. I work currently with the Fulbright and Marshall Scholars, and every year I give safety and security and other tips about what the embassy can do for students abroad. Absolutely engage with the embassy. It's worth a conversation. They may not have a lot of time. They may not be able to help you a lot, but they can give you really great information. And normally Foreign Service officers and other officers that are at post want to come out and talk. We love to do outreach. So call us and start the conversation. I would love to hear from you if any of your students are coming to the UK. Thanks.
And Jeremy, over to you.
Sure, absolutely. Final words, get informed, get registered, STEP, get insured, and get those required documents. I personally was not able to study abroad, but I nonetheless found my way to the State Department. I'm so happy to be here. I've been here for the last 8+ years. I'm grateful that I get to spend my day and my efforts working to try to help others and keep others safe. It's a very rewarding career, very happy to be here. And thank you all for your time and attention today, and everybody stay safe.
And thank you, Jeremy. And I will close. There's a lot of great information on this last slide. Social media is important to us in this day and age. So the TravelGov and then local social media of our embassies abroad, tons of information there. As a Foreign Service officer assigned here in Washington, but someone who's been in the field, I'd say, you asked this question, why this matters. And I would say that when we are far from home and something goes wrong, we need someone to help, and we need people to care. And the embassy, in the form of the American Citizen Services officers in the Foreign Service and local staff, with all of the resources that we have, we are those people. It may seem like we're faceless, or you don't know us, or we're not approachable. But hopefully this event has sort of demystified that and broken down that kind of that idea for you all. Thank you, everybody that has attended. I would say, please fill out the post-webinar survey. We want to make sure that this is something that we can continue doing and that it's of value to you. We want to hear your voice. And we thank you, each and every one of you. As I said at the end of the last one, you do so much to sort of benefit our nation. The future of the Foreign Service depends in many ways on the students that you are encouraging to go out there into the world. And we thank you for that. So be safe, be well. Take advantage of all these resources, and we hope to be with you in the future again as Consular Affairs and as fellow Americans concerned about the world around us. So thank you very much. We've had so many great comments, and a lot of engagement. Not enough time, but hope everybody stays safe, stays well. Take care.